Hello and welcome to A Sunny Book Nook. Today I'm going to be talking about all of my favorite books of 2020. This was a really difficult list to make because I have 20 favorite books of the year, and that's not even all of my favorites necessarily. These are just the top favorites. My list of honorary mentions is 30 plus books long, so I'll get into that in a different video if you want me to talk about honorary mentioned favorites, because this video is already going to be very long. So I'm gonna work through the list from least most favorite to most favorite, if that makes sense. I read 270 books this year, and this is the most I've ever read in a year by far. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm going to make another video talking about the stats for my reading this year regarding the diversity of genre, diversity of author, how much of each genre I read, a statistical breakdown to kind of gauge my reading taste and also my reading habits and stuff over the past year, and make reading goals for 2021 accordingly. But that is not what this video is about. This video is going to be breaking down all the different books that I read this year that I absolutely loved. Number 20 on my favorites list of the year is a YA contemporary by Jamie Paxton called The Life and Medieval Times of Kit Sweetly. This follows a main character who is this teenage girl. She's a senior in high school, and she is working at this medieval themed restaurant chain, and she really wants to be one of the knights who does the whole performance of jousting and whatever, but they have a very strict cis male only policy for that role. The inciting incident of this story is that this girl takes her brother's place as the knight one night. Someone takes a video of her absolutely demolishing the other knights, and it goes viral, and everyone's like, oh my god, there's this girl knight. This book really deals with family, because her relationship with her brother and her mom and her deadbeat dad is really fleshed out and discussed in a way that YA very rarely does, I think. And it feels very realistic in how her family struggles financially and how getting injured or having a medical emergency can impact that when you're in that position. And this book also has a bunch of queer characters and characters of color. I think this book was done really well, and it dealt with a lot of issues in a pretty nuanced and important way, from feminism to the corporate work environment and how fucked up that is, to friendship drama that seems more realistic and less stupid and trite than so many YA contemporaries I've read previously. So yeah, love this book, and that's why it's on my favorites of the year list. The 19th book on my favorites list is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. I read this early in the year during Black History Month, which was February for the US, and it had a really profound impact on me. I don't know, Toni Morrison's writing is just so phenomenal. This is her first book that she's written, and this is also the first book that I read of hers. I felt like her words were massaging my mind and just very slowly gripping this sense of dread and horror almost that I feel is pretty present in a lot of her writing, that kind of Southern Gothic dread almost. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I thought that it was very profound and just magnificent. So good. The 18th book on this list is actually not just a book, it's a duology, but I am going to cheat. I'm actually going to cheat a couple times on this list and say that the We Set the Dark on Fire duology by Taylor K. Mejia is my 18th favorite book of the year. Also, okay, let's be real, my ranking system of 1 through 20 is pretty arbitrary, honestly. I just had to make some sort of list. So take that with a grain of salt. Anyway, these books are so fucking good. I like the first book more than the second book, but I think they're both phenomenal. Basically, it's set in this fantasy universe where it's like a Latinx inspired fantasy universe, okay? And there's like these schools for girls where you get trained to be the primera or the segunda. And the primera is supposed to be like the wife who can run the household, and the segunda is supposed to be like the beautiful wife, right? And every powerful rich man has two, the primera and segunda, two wives, right? And so we're following these girls as they graduate this school, but there's this whole terrorism plot line where like the ruling class, the elites who live within the city borders, they kind of control through this element of folklore the quote-unquote people of the salt who live outside the borders. And our main character in this book, who is training to be a primera, she is actually an undocumented immigrant from the people of the Salt, who now has like forged documents and snuck into the academy to be a primera, and she ends up being the primera for like the most powerful son in the country, basically, who is a dickhead, and we see that throughout these books. I think that these books deal with revolution and social change and political change and intrigue in this phenomenal way. I think that most YA dystopian fantasy sci-fi stuff like really misses the mark with that type of shit, but this was really good. I want to do like a full annotated notes on these two books to kind of break down a lot of the, I think, like the commentary that is being made, and kind of apply like a Marxist analysis to it, because I think it is so there. And I also think that it's very like good at feminism because so many young adult books cannot, like, they are so bad at dealing with feminism as like a topic and plot device, but I think that it is dealt with in these two books in a really solid way. And we kind of see both sides of revolutionary politics, and I think that's very, like, within these two books, I think that's very profound. Also, the most important part is that there is a sapphic romance in here. It's a hate to love, forced marriage like situation, and oh my god, it was so good for my soul, and it will be good for yours. Coming in at number 17 on this list is Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. This book is a magical memoir that kind of incorporates elements of fantasy and magic and stuff into a memoir. It's about this girl who lives on the east side of Cleveland, and her mom is addicted to the white rocks, as is described in this book, and she is very sad and traumatized, and it's about her kind of discovering herself and coming into herself, her tragic and horrible adolescence, but that despite it being horrible in a lot of material ways, still being something so grounded in family and love and community. And wow, this book was just, it made me cry. I thought it was so good. The 16th book on this list is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is one of my favorites of the year because I just think it is so gorgeously written, and the audiobook is phenomenal. It's narrated by David Diggs, and this book is, okay, so many people have talked about this book on BookTube this year, and so I don't know if I have to give you a whole breakdown, but the basic premise is that there are these sea creatures who are kind of like mermaids who live in the ocean, and they are the descendants of enslaved pregnant women who are thrown off of ships during the transatlantic slave trade, and now these creatures live in the ocean and have their own society. However, because of the traumatic nature of their past, the history of their people is not really stored in their fish brains of like long-term memory, you know? And there's one person or one creature that is supposed to be the historian who like bears all of the weight of all of this collective memory and trauma. And we're following this main character who's basically like a teenage girl kind of, who has that responsibility of bearing all of that trauma, but not only does she remember it, like it's not just a memory in her brain, she physically like lives through it in her, like her body reacts and lives through the memories of her people in the past. And so she is like, fuck this, I cannot do this anymore, this is too much for me. I cannot handle it. And so she runs away. There's a sapphic romance in this, and I think that it explores these really, really important kind of discussions about history, family, trauma, community, and storytelling in a very short and compact way, because this book is not long at all. But again, I mean, look, it's so beautiful too. Like, look at this cover. It's gorgeous. And River Solomon is an absolute genius. Number 15 on this list is Hench by Natalie Zena Walschatz. This book is a book that I thought was very fun, but also very almost dark at the same time. It's set in a universe in which supervillains and superheroes, are rampant. Like, they're everywhere. And so are henches, who are, of course, the accomplices of those supervillains and, like, sidekicks and stuff. But we're following this main character who is this, like, 20-something-year-old woman who is working for a temp agency as a hench because she has, like, a superpower of, like, being able to deal with, like, data and, like, computer stuff really, really well. And so at this temp agency, she's like, ugh, okay. And she gets hired to work for some dickhead, and then all the shit happens in which she realizes how fucked up the whole system of, like, supervillainy and superheroes are, because superheroes actually incur so much damage on property and people's lives. However, they're so lauded as these incredible people who deserve celebration in the media and in pop culture. So she, like, sets out on this kind of plan to, like, destroy superheroes, basically. And I think that this book is so phenomenal, very original idea, and I think that it delivers it in a really, really good way. Like, it criticizes this institution of, like, superhero-dom, and then kind of uses that, and uses this kind of hyper-commodified, hyper-capitalist system of, people having to sell their labor to various, like, supervillains and superheroes to survive as, like, the people who fight for them, or the people who are their sidekicks or whatever, who take the brunt of the shit that happens. And yeah, I just thought this book was genius and so good. I loved the world building. I love the characters and the relationships, like the friendships that we see in this book. Love. They so memorable and very gripping. The next book on this list, coming in at number 13, is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. And actually, I'm going to cheat again and say, actually, this whole trilogy, which is the Broken Earth trilogy, is one of my favorite books of this year. Because this sci-fi universe is just so mind-blowing. Like, basically, there are seasons where the world just goes fucking nuts. Massive earthquakes, tsunamis, natural disasters of major kinds, and so people have to form comms, like little communities, to be able to survive and get through that season. And we're following, at the beginning of the book, we open to this woman who comes home and is like, yo, my husband just murdered my fucking kid. And also, he took my other kid with him, so now I gotta go fucking find him. And then we get into other perspectives, and one of the major key points of this story is that there are these people called Origines who can control the earth from a very young age, but they are universally hated and despised for their powers because they're seen as kind of antagonists because of their ability to, like, cause mass destruction, but they also have the ability to obviously, like, save people's lives. Basically, there's a government entity that takes in Origines as children from a young age and kind of trains them to do the government's bidding, essentially. And this trilogy, oh my god, it discusses power structures, the environment, like the universe, motherhood, community, like all of these things in this epic, fantastical way. There's so many queer characters, so many gay and trans characters, so many, like, poignant moments and wonderful twists and turns, and oh my god, mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. I cannot recommend the series enough. I didn't even read that much sci-fi before getting into this book. Like, this trilogy is kind of what got me into reading more fantasy sci-fi stuff, and so I would recommend it to people who even don't think they like sci-fi or who haven't even read, like, fiction in a long time, because wow, N.K. Jemisin is a fucking genius. The next book on this list is Lovecraft Country by Matt Huff. I only recently read this book, but I knew it was going to be a favorite before I started it, and I know now that it definitely is a favorite. This book combines sci-fi and historical fiction and like speculative fiction and like a meta narrative of including other sci-fi narratives in this really, really fucking cool way. Like, it's so cool. We're following this black family and kind of their friends and their family and stuff as they deal with all the shit that is happening because apparently somebody's dad was in some sort of natural science alchemy group where like there's powers and stuff. And so, yeah, it's fucking crazy. Each chapter, we kind of follow a different character's perspective or experience, and they're all related to each other in some way. And it's just fucking fascinating. There's like a haunted house. There is a creepy white guy who's stalking them all throughout this entire time. There are police car chases. It's wild. You have to read this book. I still need to watch the show, but like I read the book before the show for this very purpose. But damn, this book talks about safe traveling for black people during the 60s and 50s, talks about race in a really, really interesting way, and like racism in the Deep South and like antagonisms and what that looks like, as well as like more kind of under the nose things that aren't blatant like slur calling, like chasing you around with a gun, burning you at the stake, but more of like denying you housing, etc., right? Like, it was so angering for me to read, but it was also fucking amazing how everything played out. The plot was so impeccable. The characters were all really compelling, I think. Ugh, wow. The sci-fi element, the different like magic elements and stuff, fucking crazy, dude. Oh my god, it was so cool. It was so cool. Cannot recommend this book enough. The next book on this list, coming in at number 12, is Docile by K.M. Spara. Okay, please don't come for me. I know so many people don't like this book, but I fucking adored it. Because I feel like it was a really phenomenal criticism of capitalism and grooming and abusive relationships and how that can take over your entire life and personality. And also like how the rich and powerful kind of manipulate circumstances, and how even people who are very wealthy and have a lot of power, who think they are moral or like want to be more moral, ultimately cannot be due to the systems at hand in which they have to like conform to it to like survive, and how everybody is kind of implicated in the kind of mindless exploitation of so many people. There are definitely like rape scenes in here, and also just more explicit content like sex scenes and stuff, which I think was like, that was like the big selling point of this book. I feel like that was the big kind of shock factor of like, oh my god, it's like gay 50 Shades of Grey or whatever. But in my line, it's really not that, because the kind of sexual stuff is maybe 5% of the book. I feel like the rest of it has a lot to do with like kind of the intrigue in trying to overthrow this corporation that like runs the government and like is making these chemicals to inject into people to make them dociles. Oh my god. I don't know. I just think that this book was really well constructed. I think that the sci-fi element was so well and realistically fleshed out. Like, in a lot of ways, a lot of the things, obviously like all sci-fi and speculative fiction does this, where it kind of enhances and exacerbates the existing realities of society to like criticize and talk about those issues. For here, it's like how consent can be bought under capitalism, the nature of relationships and abuse and power under capitalism, and also like debt, and how the government and the news media and corporations are all in each other's pockets, how rich people do not view other people as humans. Like, it's, wow. I think that this book dealt with these things in a really interesting way, and I have a physical copy, however, it's not with me, it's in a box somewhere across the country, but once I get it back, I will be like marking it up and kind of going through it to try to break down what this book is ultimately really saying that makes it so compelling to me, and like put it in a video review, similarly as to what I'm gonna do with these books. So yeah, as you can see, I have a soft spot for sci-fi, fantasy, and speculative fiction that talks about like politics and critiques systems of power in an interesting way, in my opinion. The next book on this list, coming in at number 11, is... Hold on, I forgot to take this off my shelf. My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. This comes to no one's surprise. I've been recommending this book left and right. I'm obsessed with it. Like, I'm obsessed with this cover, too. Basically, it's this upper middle class, NYC, like, Columbia grad who's this millennial who like whose parents died. Oh, it's set in like the early 2000s, which becomes important, and she's just like living out her life, and she fucking hates her life. She's super depressed and not happy. She's very isolated. She doesn't really have any friends except this one annoying ass bitch named Julia, I think, and she like doesn't really have a job or anything. She worked at like an art gallery. Basically, she calls up this psychiatrist who is an absolute nut, like a cat lady to the highest extreme and just so crazy. And she is like, hey, can you give me prescriptions for like all of these sleeping drugs? And basically she takes all these drugs to attempt to be like catatonic and sleep for a whole year, because her theory is that if she sleeps for a whole year, then when she wakes up the next year, she'll be a whole new person and she'll finally like herself. Obviously the process to which that happens is not necessarily what she like intends, and I thought this book was fucking, oh my god, it was such a wild ride. It was like a very fun romp. I felt like it dealt with this main character's self-loathing and her kind of just dark hatred of so many things around her, and you know, which is ultimately derivative of like her own self-hatred in this really like realistic way. And our main character is very, very disgusting and gross, but she's beautiful, like model stunning, so no one really calls her on her shit for that. And I just thought this book was so good. Definite favorite of the year. It's been staying on my mind like ever since I read it at the very beginning of this year, because I just think it's just memorable like that, you know? Coming in at number 10 on this list, we have Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This book is a courtroom thriller / literary fiction that is, oh my god, fucking mind-blowing. The inciting incident is that there is this kind of healing spa of some sort run by Korean immigrants, and there's a fire at this goddamn spa, but in the spa there are people in there, and so like one of them dies. But the spa treatment place, I'm forgetting what it's called exactly, it's kind of targeted towards parents with autistic children, and so this book deals with like being in a parent to an autistic child, also like the immigrant experience, sexual abuse and power dynamics, being a teenage girl, and family drama and messed up family history, and town dynamics, and like motherhood in general. It was just so good. I was very, very compelled by both of the lawyers, because like Angie Kim was an attorney before she like wrote this book, I think, and you can tell because the way that these lawyers present their arguments is so fucking wow. Things are revealed to us as the reader as we go along with every chapter of the book, and the whole time you're kind of like guessing, and you're kind of being like, well, who really did it? Because at the beginning we all think, oh, it's this one girl, but no, it can't be her, because, and then you think, and then everything comes to light, and it's just so insane. Also, if you liked Celeste Ng's books, you would fucking love this book. And if you read like thrillers and mysteries and stuff usually, you should read this book too, because I feel like you would really enjoy it. There's a level of intrigue there and just mystery that is, I think, unmatched, truly. Coming in at number 9 on my list is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This book destroyed me. I was so emotionally invested in these characters who like are in love but who can't really, like they're growing up together kind of, and they're in different weird environments every time, and they're in these paths that intersect and cross in and out of each other. Like, So beautiful. I thought that it was very realistic, and like a lot of the kind of observations and relationships and like the different people and stuff. It was just so heartwarming and shrewd in its understanding of people and like the world, and it's set in like college mostly. There's so many books that are set in high school, but no, this is more realistic because it's like a romance that stretches out throughout kind of their adulthood and not necessarily their coming of age in adolescence. Oh, also, Sally Rooney is a Marxist, and it really, really shows in her writing, I think. Coming in at number 8, I am again cheating because this is not just one book. These are 2 books. First, but they're both Ted Chiang short story collections, so I'm going to give myself a pass on that. He's written Exhalation and also My Life and Other Stories. These books, wow. Like, every single short story in these books are so compelling, mind-blowing, fascinating, interesting, fucking crazy. Like, he deals with everything from neuroscience to physics to time travel to religion. How Ted Chiang constructs these stories is fucking wild. It's crazy. It's mind-blowing. He's just a fucking genius, okay? And regardless of what genre you read, you need to read these short stories because I guarantee you they will shift your understanding of you and the universe and how you interact with it. Guaranteed. Number 7 on my list is The Hike by Drew Magary. This book is like a fever dream video game. This normal, middle-aged family dude goes off for this work retreat. Once he gets there, he's like, I have some time to kill, so he goes on a hike. But on this hike, he encounters some really weird shit and then realizes, where the fuck am I? He doesn't know where he is anymore. And then he spends time on this hike being like, what the fuck is going on? All this crazy shit is happening, and elements of his past are coming in, and he's like, it is so memorable. Yeah, I need a copy of this hardcover, because this cover just is really solid in its depiction of all the crazy shit that, like, goes down in this book. Coming in at number 6 on my favorites of the year list is An Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. River Solomon on here twice, you know, as they should be. This book is about this spaceship set like thousands of years in the future, but this spaceship, it has a class structure like A to Z in terms of levels of the ship that are very much based in the antebellum South almost. Very much like a racial anti-black hierarchy, and each different floor kind of like speaks its own language-ish, and transportation and travel between these different levels is pretty limited, and like all the rich people of course live at the top and they reap the fruits of the labor of everyone at the bottom who is like growing their crops and like, you know, making sure that their electricity and water is running, etc. And it's fucking awful. And we're basically following this girl who is autistic and who is kind of genderqueer. There's also like a revolution element. The main character has this sort of friendship / apprenticeship with the doctor of the ship, who happens to be half black, but because his father is a very powerful man, he is still a freaking doctor of the ship. And their relationship also grants her like more access to certain things, and so she also has to provide for like her family, like her found family, kind of the people that she's close to. And yeah, I don't know, I just thought that it was so like tragic but compelling, and the narrative and the plot points and the different characters and stuff, the voices were so strong, and our main character was so complex and nuanced, and wow, it was just such a beautiful story, and it has my heart. River Solomon, genius. Number 5 on this list is We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Barry. This book was wild and hilarious in the best ways possible. Every line, basically every paragraph, had me chuckling, like in my head, or being like, LOL. It's set in the 80s in the town where the first girls during the Salem witch trials like made accusations. That's the town that it's set around this group of girls who are all on a field hockey team together, and they do some sort of witchcraft coven situation that grants them powers to be very good at field hockey. And the point of view that we follow in this story is kind of collective. It's third person, but a lot of it is written like we, us, we knew. So we're kind of in like, it is from the collective mind of this field hockey team. And this book, I feel like, talks about teenage girlhood in the setting of like the 80s, and so many different like family drama things of like divorce and affairs and gay people and people, you know, having their little archetypes, but then not being necessarily what the archetype is, and how they grow up to be, and how they turn out, and what their like position on the team is, and how all these girls defend each other and are ultimately like a team. And I just thought it was so good. The witchcraft stuff, phenomenal. The sports team stuff, great. I hate sports. I hate them so much. I'm not a sports person. However, this book, It hit the mark for me. It was good. It was phenomenal. I loved it. That's why it's in my top 5. Because we're in my top 5 now. Moving into book number 4. Starlings by Jo Walton. This is a short story collection. It also has some poems and a play in there. And it is mind-blowing. I love to talk about how speculative fiction, sci-fi, short stories and stuff are crazy. But this was, not only was it like crazy and mind-blowing, but it was also so heartwarming and so intelligent and funny and witty, and it combines all of my favorite things and all these different stories. And Jo Walton is a genius, and this book is so good and so underrated. I need more people to read this book. I love it so much. I love it so much. Number 4. This is another cheat, because this is a series duology with like another book of novellas / short stories, and that is The Chronicles of Alice by Christina Henry. All of these books are so good. Dark, gritty, fantastical, amazing, wonderful. It's a retelling of Alice in Wonderland in this much more dark way, like in an adult way. And it deals with so much. Trigger warnings for like sexual abuse and assault, and just general like gore and brutality and awfulness. But the concept is that there's like the old city and the new city. New city is clean, shiny, bright, everything is nice and lovely and boring. The outside is the old city, which is overrun by like gang leaders and brothels and robbers. Yeah, it's a horrible, dark place, and very scary, very not good for especially young girls. And we are seeing Alice as she like goes into the old city, and like, but the thing is that the kind of setup of the story is that she wakes up in a mental hospital. She's like in a mental hospital because her family put her there because she's crazy, and there's a fire, and she and Hatcher, the guy who lives on the other side of the wall for her, they both escape, and they're like, whoa, and they set off on this like quest, and it's crazy. It's so crazy, and it's so good and wild and good. I say crazy and wild so much on this video. I'm so sorry, but it is. It is good and wonderful and amazing. Moving into number 3. Actually, 1, 2, and 3 in this video, in this list, is basically interchangeable. I mean, a lot of these rankings are, to be honest. It's hard for me to rank my favorite books when they're all things I adore and love, as you can tell. But number 3 on this list, which could also be number 1, but, you know, for the sake of the rank. Stephen Spotswood, Fortune Favors the Dead. Oh my god. So fucking good. Sapphic mystery, set in the 40s in NYC. Detective duo of badass women. This girl who, like, joined the circus, and this other woman who is, like, this MILF right here. And there's a murder of someone in this rich family business, and there's intrigue and romance, and this fortune teller involved, and, ghosts, maybe. It's so fun. I've reread this, I don't really reread books, but I've reread this book 3 times already because it is so fucking good. I adore it. The main character's voice is so humorous and lovely. Oh my god, I need more people to read this book. So underrated. If you like mysteries, if you like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, if you like Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie, if you like lesbians, you gotta read this book. If you like bisexual women, you gotta read this book. You gotta. Yeah, very good. I loved it. Number 2 on this list is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Of course. So fucking good. We're following all these British black women. Well, most of them are black, most of them are women, and it's kind of their experiences in the world. We are following so many different perspectives and lives, but they all kind of intersect in an interesting way. I've talked about this book before in so many videos, but it's so good, and I can't wait to reread it in 2021 and annotate it and be all the different profound parts that really resonated with me, because so much of this book did. Okay, book number 1. You all know what it is. The Mistborn Trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I don't have the big book with me because it's in my fucking package. But it's so beautiful, and I need to reread it, obviously. But this story, this universe, this world of metal alchemy and powers through burning metals, kind of, and this orphan girl and her kind of rising through the ranks and becoming the leader of this rebellion and overthrowing this dark lord. But then after you overthrow the dark lord, oh my god, there's all this shit that happens. But before overthrowing that dark lord, she has to infiltrate the rich townies and develop a relationship with the most powerful kid of the powerful houses, and has to pretend to hate poor people even though she is a poor person, just disguised as a rich person. And so good. This is definitely my favorite. One of my favorite books of 2020, because I read so many fucking good books this year. But yeah, those are all my favorite books of the year. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think of them, or if any of these books look interesting to you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stupid bullshit, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!